and welcome back to another episode of Real Estate Unlocked, your go-to mini-series where we break down everything you need to know about buying and selling a home. In today's episode, we're diving into Section 4, the purchase price from the updated Manitoba Offer to Purchase. Let's get started. This section sets out the total purchase price of the property, how it's going to be paid, and how adjustments for things like property taxes or mortgage responsibilities will be handled on possession date. It's a key part of the offer because it clearly explains how much the buyer is paying and ensures both the buyer and the seller understand the financial side of the transaction. Here in part 1, we write down the total purchase price that the buyer is offering. We'll also indicate how the purchase is being financed. So whether that be through the buyer's own funds, a new mortgage, or sometimes by assuming the seller's existing mortgage. It's really important that both parties understand exactly how the transaction is being financed, because the seller needs to know that the funds are actually going to be available to complete the sale. The buyer needs to confirm that they can actually meet the payment terms, and understanding financing helps the lawyers coordinate the transfer of funds properly on possession day. If funding is coming from the proceeds of a new mortgage, it's super important not to underestimate the amount. The amount listed here is the maximum dollar amount that's allowed to be delayed if funding isn't ready on time. If the mortgage is too low and additional funds are needed, then the buyer is going to have to come up with that extra money themselves. So accuracy here protects both the buyer and the seller to ensure that the transaction can close smoothly. Part 2 deals with adjustments, essentially making sure that the buyer and the seller each paid their fair share of ongoing property costs. Adjustments typically include things like property taxes, utility levies, or local improvement charges. The key idea here is that these costs are typically paid in advance. So when the buyer takes possession, they only pay for their portion from possession date onward. The seller gets credit for any portion that they've already paid, and the buyer starts paying from that date. This helps to prevent any confusion or disputes after closing because both sides know exactly who is responsible for what. For example, if property taxes have been prepaid by the seller for the year, the buyer is going to reimburse the seller for the portion of the year after possession. Likewise, if there are utility or condo fees adjustments, this ensures that each party only pays for the time that they actually owned or occupied the property. So Section 4 is an important part of the offer because it clearly sets the purchase price and the financing method. It ensures fair division of costs like taxes and levies, and it protects both parties from disputes over financial responsibilities. Without this section, there could be a lot of confusion or disagreements about how each party owes and how the payments are being made. That's it for this week's episode of Real Estate Unlocked. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow along as we continue breaking down the Manitoba Offer to Purchase, section by section. Next week, we'll be diving into Section 5, the deposit and how it's handled. Everything you need to know about protecting both the buyer and seller when money changes hands. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next week.